Today we're going to talk about product strategy for founders. And since at least half of you are looking to build new products, it's always good to go back to the basics and kind of recap what you have to know and what you have to think about when you are starting out with a new product. Or if you're currently running something, you can also kind of refine what you have, maybe kind of correct your direction. So my name is Portman. I'm from Russia. I do a lot of things, but currently I think these are like my flagship things. One is the UI audit. It's a nice book for founders that tries to tie together product strategy and UI design and help you make informed UX decisions in your software. I run UI Brackets podcast, and lately, just launched a month ago, started Tiny Reminder, which is a little software tool for people who do client work. And Benedict is the one who is making it happen in terms of development. I was really lucky to find him to do that for me. So these three things are, you can check them out online later. And what kind of products we're going to be talking about today? Of course, primarily SaaS products, but all these strategy things are totally applicable to info products, books and courses that you're going to make, to your productized consulting. If you don't know what it is, it's serving your consulting services as a fixed price package where you're the one setting terms, not your client. And of course, software. This book was called Mastering App Presentation. Was my first book, was written in the fall of 2013 when I was very, very pregnant with my second son. I thought, I'm going to spend some time, make something good for my authority. It worked great for authority, but it was a true disaster in terms of product strategy. I had no clue how to define an audience. I had no clue, how to do marketing. And after we define strategy components today, I'm going to show you the exact mistakes I would not have made if I did it today. So product strategy is a recipe for disaster. Of course, you can fail even if you have good product strategy. But if you don't define your audience, for example, you're absolutely bound to something good not happening. First topic is why your products should even exist. It's a whole separate topic for discussion. Well, what you should know is that products don't exist because you have an amazing idea. That doesn't work like that. Even though the startup land operates around someone having a genius idea and building it and now having a lot of money, but what in fact you should do, you should research your audience, find what pains that they are experiencing, and try to build a tool that solves their pain. There is a method by Amy Hoy and Alex Hellman called 30 by 500, and they preach a method called Sales Safari. I do highly recommend you research it and try to apply it in your work. What it essentially means, you can score forums and other media online where people are not intentional about their words, but it's just, normally talking, normally ranting and expressing those pain points in a much freer and more effective way. And also, Yana Kumala from First Officer has an amazing checklist. You can try and research it later. She has a checklist of potential problems that you should avoid when you're starting a SaaS. These run from, relying on someone's API heavily, which is not a good thing. Building a business that's critical for that's mission critical for your customer, which means you're gonna not sleep well at night, worrying about your business, and 50 things like that. Unfortunately, there are no ideal businesses. Usually, you cannot avoid having some of these drawbacks, but still, it's good to think about them when you're starting out. So once you kind of know what you're going to build, you have to define your strategy. Everyone today is operating the term product market fit, and it means that you're building something that the market needs. It's great, and you can search for it, but in order to find it, you have to fix your strategy, at least for a short period of time, and produce something that's strictly aligned with your strategy. If you pivot, like the fashionable word pivot, if you pivot all the time and are swimming like that, you're not going to achieve anything. In order to be productive, just fix your strategy for a while and see if there is a fit. If there is none, move on, but it's really great to write down your strategy and build your product according to it. If you don't write down your strategy, or if you don't have it in your mind, you're going to be totally vague about what you're building, and it's going to be tough to take decisions. So today, we're going to learn how to define your strategy, how to apply your strategy in your everyday work, and how to deal with new features and think large scale. 4 pillars of product strategy: audience, goals, tasks, and objects. I'm borrowing these from my UI audit method, where I'm trying to tie together product strategy and UX. But this is totally applicable to books, courses, everything like that. So thing number 1, you need to decide. It's super important. And I know 50% founders are not thinking right about that. They're thinking of the right tool, build it, and then try to find an audience that's going to pay for it. This is totally wrong. You should find an audience that is really good for you and build something for them. So define who is your ideal user, who is your paying customer. Do you know them? If you know nothing about ballet schools, it's no good if you try to build an app for ballet schools, because it's going to take you 5 years to learn how ballet dancers think. But if you've been out there for a while, working with some audience, leverage that knowledge and build something for them. Do you like them? You might know your clients very well, but you might not respect them for something. You might, for example, I don't know, it's hard to name an audience without offending them, but if you don't like them, don't try to build something for them. You're going to die doing support, like seriously. Everything, because you're going to have to get in touch with them all the time. You're going to have to talk to them, deal with support, write for them. And I can't even imagine that happening if you don't like these people. Can they pay you? For example, school systems, public schools are amazing. They have a lot of pains. They might have money, but their purchasing process, the way they buy your tool, is totally incredible. It's really no way for you to, or it's very hard, rather say, to get into that procurement process when they're purchasing software. So think about how you're going to sell it first. If they cannot, if they probably not going to work with the indie developer, there is no point for you to make it. And do you know how to reach them, preferably online? If you make something and you have no clue where these people hang out, how are you going to find them to market your product? That's like marketing 101. But sometimes some businesses are strictly brick and mortar, and in order to reach them with a special piece of software, you've got to go out of your way, like drive to physical locations, find these people, and probably really push hard to tell them about your software. It's way easier to address certain niches of people who are already hanging out online, who have their own forums, who have their own places. You can integrate, become the part of their community, and not necessarily promote your product, but just reach out to them. Question number 1. Number 2 is goals. What goals is the user trying to achieve with your product? Think of global purpose. For example, if they're doing client work, their primary goal might be making more money or looking good in front of the client's eyes or something like that. Usually there is a whole pyramid of goals that you can address, and you can go a few levels deeper. For example, if you do software for writing books, your customer would say something like that: I want to write a book, because then I can build authority, I can have better clients, make more money, travel more, and all these goals you can have in mind, and you can address them in sales copy, and they're going to help you build a more specific product for them. Component number 3 is task. Write down a few, not too many, important things that people do every day, not once in a while, every day when they log into your web app, for example. What tasks they perform daily. And most importantly, where does the key value come from? Sometimes, for example, with Tiny Reminder, it's a piece of software that reminds clients to fill out a form with something. So form building is definitely an essential part of the process, but it's not where the key value comes from. Key value comes from the reminders themselves. So we would rather spend more time polishing the features relevant to reminders than building 12 field types for the form. That's a nice example. Because if you try to go like this wide on all of your features, it's going to be not a very successful strategy. It helps to classify tasks by type. They are analytical when people just go in and see some numbers. They can be proactive, which means actually crafting some work, making new spreadsheets, filling out something. Or they can be reactive, for example, doing support, when you have like an inbox and you have to react to new items. It helps to classify them this way because a nice app most likely has a combination of these items. Because if it's only analytical, it's going to be hard to make people just to go back there. There won't be no reason. So you need to include maybe some reactive components, maybe require some action from the user or something like that. Objects. It's really important to write down what items the user is dealing with so that you don't forget to manage them right in your app. Usually if you write down a list of tasks, from the previous question, the nouns you see there are going to be quite the list of objects you see here. It's super important, yeah. So objects are important because our web applications and software, they are built to facilitate tasks, but what they actually manage inside is objects. It's exactly what you're going to represent there. It's what you're going to include in your navigation. So it's super important to list a specific short list of things that you're going to manage and exclude everything else, because otherwise you're going to get into feature creep once again. It's very important to use the real language of your customers to describe all these questions and product strategy, because that's what you're going to be using when you're building your interface. That's what you're going to be using when you're writing your sales copy. Here is what Mike Bugby said about Tiny Reminder when he first checked out our interface. And you know what? He's probably right. But that doesn't mean that us, like most of us are not native speakers here, it doesn't mean that we can't build good software. It means that we have to work twice as hard to nail those nouns, to nail those verbs that our clients are actually using and duplicate them in our sales copy. There is no way you can actually invent them, especially if you're not a native speaker like myself. Now, which doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to rush and rename everything from scratch, but it does plant like a little seed. What can we do better in that regard? Now that you wrote down your strategy, you can apply it. In your sales copy, you should be addressing your audience that you've chosen. And if you do pick like a vague audience, instead of spending time being specific, crispy, attractive for them, you're going to spend extra effort and time being vague. Because you're going to think, oh, but what if I say that? I'm going to exclude that part of my customers. If I said that, I'm going to include the other part of my customers. Damn, how do I solve this dilemma? How do I write copy vague enough, and that vague copy never converts? Even if you are afraid to kind of sort out part of your customer, it's still better to address just one, because once copy is crispy for one group of customer, it starts to be crispy for everyone. They know they're not exactly that group, but they can see that you are seeing their problems well. And if you just write, like, we're solving all marketing problems, we help you save time online, or something like that, that's no good proposition for any group of customers. In your sales copy, it really helps to appeal to their big goals from a strategy and to shape out the big strategy, the big direction for them, and to describe their tasks so that you provide context. In your product design, focus on those important tasks. You can really easily forget about the rest of them. If they're poorly executed, that's fine. But if you nail like 3 to 4 important tasks really well, or just one, like good example is Freckle, time tracking app. One thing they do well is the time tracking process, just like the streamline, the single button, the single time entry. And that's going to make your product already good. Focus on one task at a time. If you're building a screen, don't try to facilitate like 5 tasks from it. And carefully manage the important objects. It helps so that most likely your navigation should show like the majority of them, and the person should always know where their stuff lives. A good example of that is a quick add thing. Like you've seen those little widgets that say quick add something, and you usually have a very short form for adding it. But the biggest problems that arises after that is, now that I added it, where does it live now? Like, if it's not obvious from navigation, you're in trouble because the person just did something they don't know where to find. That's really, really big trouble for you. So in software products, streamline your most important task, make it one important task per screen, and build your navigation around objects, as we described now. This is Ankur Nagpal, the founder of Teachable. It was previously called Fedora. This is great software, and his approach to building software is something I deeply share, is making your strengths stronger, not spreading yourself thin over all features. That's what makes people love a product, is having strengths stronger, rather than a product that's just okay in every regard. So what did I do wrong with my first book? Really, it had a very vague name because it was not obvious what kind of apps I meant. And frankly speaking, I was trying to address a lot of people there. I thought, that's a presentation of apps is a nice topic. It's probably applicable to designers. It's also probably applicable to those who sell their apps, like founders. It's probably applicable to mobile apps, but it's also applicable to web applications. In the end, I had Benedict, like 5 years ago, buying it for presenting his web application, while in fact it was a book for designers teaching them to showcase iOS applications. Like, totally not good, but I was working so hard to make the copy vague that it convinced totally different people. If I were to write it again, like today, I would probably name it very differently. That would be a guide for designers on selling and presenting their work. That would be way more transparent than this kind of title. So when we launched Tiny Reminder this time, we do have a precise audience this time. We have people who do client work. And when I first came up with the idea of the form with the reminders, I had like a 3x3 grid of use cases, including conference organizers, teachers, trainers, consultants, everybody else who can make use of this product. But a couple of weeks later, I realized that I'm not eating my own dog food here. I should really follow my own advice and pick a niche audience so that I can focus on things. And after we decided to focus on people who do client work, that is freelancers and consultants, for example, it instantly became clear what exactly to build, and it became much easier to name things. For example, we can definitely call people clients now, whereas if we were to support like 10 user groups, we would not be sure, like, how do we call them? Counter engines? I don't know. Who are these people who are filling out forms? If it's a form for consultants, we have clients, we have certain pains. It's really way easier. And of course, what we did right this time doesn't mean that Tiny Reminder is going to be a superb success, but it definitely expands that luck surface where you can succeed with a product. After you've built something, you set on a certain strategy, there comes life, and you have tons of feature requests. You have people asking for things, you have your own ideas in mind. How do you deal with new features without becoming like a Frankenstein product with no focus? Because feature creep can truly ruin your product. I'm going to tell you a story. So I have 2 kids at home, and last year my mom gave them 2 little goldfish. They are like $1 or $2 each, really, really cheap. And I thought, thank you, Mom. I've always wanted to have fish at home. Maybe it's time. So I opened up Google and started my research. Like, what are the next steps after I have all these fish? And I discovered that these 2 fish have a need for 20 gallons of water for each fish. This particular kind of fish is not very compatible with the majority of aquarium plants. Also, these goldfish, they bully other kinds of fish. So I can put in like my favorite types, I have to now deal with this little two that I have, and they need daily maintenance. So like my family wouldn't be able to travel well. We need to think about not only 2 kids, but also 2 little fishes that need to be fed, which is totally overboard. So I said, Mommy, I'm sorry, but we're going to give away that fish. And really, while that was a very simple impulse purchase, a cheap one, it definitely had a lot of implications. It's exactly the same story for founders. When you build new features, it's simple to just launch them, but you have a whole burden of things to support afterwards. Your strategy becomes more vague with every single feature you build. Your marketing becomes more vague. You're not sure which of them are worth mentioning because, as founders, we are proud of every single feature we make. You can't just sell every single feature. It's going to be a big list. You got to focus on them, and that focusing becomes harder as you expand that feature surface. You're going to do support for them. If you build something questionable, you're going to ask people's question. If you build new feature, you probably got to remake those videos or educational slides you have in your support documentation, which is also takes time, definitely. And usability. A UI which is bloated with features, which has like all corners busy with different buttons, it's not pleasant to look at, and it's definitely harder to use than something simple, something streamlined. So for goodness sake, try to think about these implications when you build new features. That's what Peldi of Balsamic says. My job is saying no a lot, because if you try to make a tool that pleases everyone, it's going to be a very, very terrible tool. Totally agree with that. So here are the classic qualifying questions for new features. Important to answer them well. Does the feature solve a real pain? What are the development and support costs? Can we build an integration? For example, Zapier these days offers way better, instead of building it yourself, you can allow other third parties to do this much better because it's their own focus. And what part of the existing user base is going to benefit from it? Or maybe it's just 3 people, and they might be particularly in the free plan, for example. There is definitely no benefit in building it for them. But there are more qualifying questions which relate to your product strategy. These are really helpful. So you have that audience defined in your strategy. Does your new feature serve that audience, or does it try to start being vague and serve more people, expand the audience? Does it serve the big goal, or does it add more goals to the plate of your user? Does it add new tasks? Does it breed new objects in your object system in your app? If it does, most likely the answer should be no, because more tasks and more problems and more things to manage, they don't make a happy user. A user wants to come into your app, do something, and then leave. For example, there is software that might suggest further improvements for you, but if you do this in the wrong way, if you kind of bully the user with these suggestions that they should be doing, it's not a good emotional thing, because your idea is to relieve their life, to make it easier, not to pile things on their to-do list, because they have a big to-do list already. And the last step, think large scale, because nothing exists in isolation. Your product doesn't exist in isolation. First, it's tied to your personality. It's tied to other products of yours, and it's good if you think of the large-scale system from the very beginning. For example, a big mistake I see is that people are doing consulting for one audience, writing a book for the other audience, and doing a software product for the third audience. That, of course, might work if there are 3 great products, but it would be much easier if you had a single mailing list for all of them and would address like a single vertical of pains. For example, here's a simple product lineup. It starts with a free lead magnet, for example, free course, with some entry point purchase, a book, a spreadsheet, or something like that. For example, Yana, our first officer, she started out with selling a simple spreadsheet addressing the same analytics problems. And by validating that idea and collecting signups, she was already able to, when she built her final product, she was able to promote it to an existing list, which was very focused. And that's a great strategy to have. So you can really build these one by one, focusing on the same audience. Here is an advanced product lineup for those who like to do a lot of things. it's about the same, but you can also have a medium touch product, an expensive video course or something like that, or consulting package, which is in the range of like $300 or something like that, a free 1-hour consultation. Your main product, and it really helps to add a super expensive dream product, or I forgot, they call it, I think, a Mercedes offering, something that nobody's ever going to buy, but it helps to anchor the price of everything else. So everything else seems cheaper and more affordable as opposed to your Mercedes offer. Also helps you raise your self-esteem in front of your audience. And think of your personal strength. I think it was in the book Smart Cuts, they mentioned the concept of parlaying, if I'm pronouncing it right, which means that you take your strength from one field and try to use it in the other. And most likely you're going to be more successful than those who were just trying to grow vertically without shifting fields from time to time. For example, there was an analysis of US presidents, and almost none of them were born in politics. Most of them were like university director or people from military who first succeeded in one area, then shifted to politics, and using their domain knowledge, they were able to achieve way more success than people who were just born being, aspiring senators, for example. There is almost no president that come from Senate, even though it might be an organic path. So, for example, how does that convey in SaaS products? Here's my friend from Canada, Marie Poulin. She is a designer by trade, but here's what she does. She runs a digital strategy school for designers, which is an expensive course. She builds Doki, which is soft SaaS product for building courses, and she has a consulting business helping clients build courses. So all of that is tied around the courses ecosystem, while she's a designer and she can leverage all her personal strengths and design strength working in these fields. When you build a product, you really need to think about your content strategy, things that you're going to do later to promote it. You can build these items gradually. You definitely need to get started with a mailing list, just to make sure you capture people who come to your site. Then you can make a free course to attract these people. You can start a blog. You can maybe write a book to promote your SaaS product. You can start a podcast, do videos, whatever format fits your fancy, But you really need to think about that up front. It's great if you have that marketing plan in place before you start building actual SaaS. And one important takeaway after a few launches that we did last year, you should only count on your own audience. This is like super important. Even if you think that you have influencer friends, even if you think that your product hunt launch is going to bring you a lot of customers, you can kind of hope for it, but it's not a must-have. For example, with my first book, I was hoping that I'm going to interview Nathan Barry, and he tweets about my book, and I'm going to have the sales rolling in. First, well, I don't think he even tweeted. Even if he did tweet, a tweet is a very, very non-existent thing. It's a very short appearance in front of a very small audience, even if he has like a huge list. What is really effective is being featured in a newsletter of such people, but really big influencers, they care a bunch about their list. So it's super hard to make like a way in their dedicated campaign. It's really no way you can count on that, only if you're paying them a lot of money, but that's not a good thing for a bootstrapper. So even if they tweet, it's not going to be a ton of sales your way. And influencer friends are friends, they're going to tweet about it, but again, it's not a dedicated campaign. They're not going to sell it hard. And Product Hunt or Hacker News are good. They can do some magic from time to time, but they also can be a flop. Like, I don't know, stars align in a bad way. But what if your entire strategy was focused on Product Hunt launch and you flop it? What do you do next? You don't even have a single person to email after that. Maybe you just collected like 30 signups and that's it. So think about that up front. Your own audience is your people who are loyal to your stuff, and you can email them over and over again and convert them. That relationship is priceless, and you can only count on your own mailing list here. And the closing thought, you know, as bootstrappers, we often have limited resources, we can't hire expensive designers, but focus strategy, saying no, is cheap. It doesn't cost you anything. It's a luxury that you can truly afford. You can really truly afford building a small niche product and becoming successful with it. And I do hope you will take my advice. Thank you very much.
Questions? You were talking about the Mercedes offer?
Right.
I love it. No, I love it. I'm trying to think of an example of what that would be that we might all kind of relate to. Do you have one?
I do have one. On my consulting site, I have monthly design coaching for developer teams, which starts at $8,000 a month. And really, if I had such offer, I would charge that money. But of course, no one particularly needs that from the cold sale. But it helps to anchor cheaper audits for like 1,500. They seem really cheap as opposed to that. Okay. That's for consulting. For Mercedes, in SaaS, that's an enterprise package, of course. If it's like $499, you can easily anchor that to your like $39 typical package. And there you go, it seems cheap.
Not a question, but the goldfish analogy is pure gold.
Really?
Pure goldfish.
I was walking around shocked, like how much they require. Seriously, 2 little fish. You can't even keep them in a jar like that. They're gonna die. They need like that.
I honestly have never heard, like as a software consultant, I've given that as advice, but I have never heard that point so clearly articulated. That should get a lot of money.
Thank you. Yeah. Christoph.
I love how you said that you should never trust on your influencer friends to help you. It's so hard to not get excited because it's the same thing that happened to me with my book. I had a few friends who told me, yeah, I'll promote it in my newsletter. Yeah, give me an affiliate link and stuff. And I was like, this is going to be great. Didn't happen. So I think that is worth repeating.
Also, generally speaking, affiliate programs fail in 95% of cases. Only, like, they can shoot well, but it's really, really very rare case. So don't count on them too much. It's either going to be people who are eager to be your affiliate, but they have a small or irrelevant audience. But really big people who can sell well, they're most likely not too enthusiastic because they're like rolling in such offers, not from yourself, but from others too. So. And that doesn't make them bad people, it's just they're busy and their list is very precious.
It's interesting too because it does happen, like you do get those large word of mouth windfalls from time to time, but it's not a core strategy. Like you depend on that, you'll dry up, you'll get disappointed, you'll get discouraged because you can't. It's never, and it's a bad way to live too, where you feel like the relationships you have, you're trying, like if you're holding out for them to give you some benefit, it's just a terrible way to have a relationship. Whereas if you have those connections and you know once or twice a year you get a windfall of traffic, then you're feeling good about it. But then when it goes away, you still have your core strategy. That was great advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Paul Jarvis calls it gravy. So when he has an article about that. So when he launches, for example, something, he has a small number that he wants to achieve, and everything else he takes as gravy for that, like as a pleasant bonus. And I usually try to set very small, realistic numbers for every launch, and like I want to hope for a few hundred. I set 100 as a realistic goal, and I get 45 as a result. And I've learned to not be disappointed about it. But unfortunately, like online sales are a super hard thing. And if you think you can do that, most likely you can do like half of it. And really false hopes are really dangerous. don't be afraid to make mistakes, but also don't be disappointed when they do. It's a very long learning story with products and with the audience.
So you showed like 2 examples of product portfolios, or almost like these funnels where people they get your entry-level product, and then later maybe they're going to go for a coaching call or something that comes after that. What do you think is a good strategy to actually build that portfolio up? Like, do you start with the most expensive product or the cheapest one, or do it all at the same time? Is there any advice you can give?
Well, consulting services are really fast to set up. You just spend like an afternoon thinking what you can serve. For example, on my site, there is a page with services, and some of these services have a dedicated landing page, but you can easily just write 1 paragraph of copy, write a price, and say like, email me more for details. So that letter you can build really fast. One of the things you can do as fast as possible is doing a free course or a lead magnet of sorts, because as soon as you start acting like in the digital universe, you want to capture those people. So that's like number 1 thing you should build. So if you start with that, and if you're consulting things, that's going to be already fun. And then you build up different content formats as you like, really. There is no bad strategy about them as soon as you do them.
Do you have any specific strategies on building the audience in the first place?
Great question. It's really good when you start. All right. I think you should start with building like a personal level of people, maybe. For example, 4 years ago, I was starting out from Russian countryside. I knew 0 people. I joined Justin Jackson's JFDI group, and there were like 5 people who gravitated towards me in my list. So they were the first people on there. And that's already something. There are people who exist in the sphere. They can tweet stuff. So then you can do a free course, probably ask them to tweet about it. So, and the free courses are not so popular anymore, but you can think of something effective that you can distribute for free. That's a great way. So with that, you can hope for retweets from them. You're going to get like maybe 20 or 50 people on your list from there. Hopefully. It's really slow. And then from there, you can bombard these people with more great content, ask them to share, build more freebies to launch, and ask them to spread the word. So it kind of grows exponentially. It's not very fast. There are also outreach methods where you can try to write nice guest posts if you're a good writer already, or you can try to appear on someone's podcast. But if you have no audience and no solid site, it's really hard to do so, especially the podcast side. Like, you've got to have like some authority behind yourself before doing it. So a lot of things you can try, but I think it starts with a small group and then grows as you nurture them with good content.
And to follow up on that, did you notice that the kind of mails you write to a list changes when your list grows? Is it more personal in the beginning? Because for me, I have like a handful of email subscribers. It would feel weird to. I mean, it doesn't really make a difference for the receiver, but for me, it's weird to write like, hey, I'm writing this to my list, but it's only.
You definitely grow more comfortable as you send more and more campaigns, and writing as personal as you can is your best strategy. So don't be afraid to write personal stuff to your people. It's hard to decide which part of yourself to reveal to the audience. For example, I rarely talk about my family more than like number of sons, like, and I don't tweet their pictures, but I do mention it. But I do love to express my personal opinions about work, about the industry. So just reveal what kind of self you want to expose and be personal about that self. That's not hard, and that's politically correct, without like, going to too much laundry or something like that.
I just wanted to say I really loved what at some point you said it's all about expanding that luck surface. I just love that as an image. The luck surface. Make it as big as possible.
We just talked last night that even if you have all these basics nailed, you still 95% of SaaS initiatives, they fail. and yours can absolutely be one of them, even if you do things right. But if you do things wrong, your luck surface is like that. If you do things right, it's better. You can like go around to chase it or something. Yeah.
Okay, actually, follow-up question. So, okay, so if you want to expand your luck surface, you pretty much want to do all these experiments, you know, see what sticks and what's successful. But like, as you, at the same time, like you said, you need to balance that with kind of your profile. You want to make sure you're not too diversified, because otherwise it becomes hard to control your message and like target your audience. How do you kill these experiments, you know, the parts of your luck surface that don't work out?
My strategy is not declare the failures. For example, last summer I had an idea to build forums at UI Breakfast, and I purchased the software, I built the thing, I talked to a bunch to other people, but then I realized that I don't want to do that because it's just a huge waste of time, essentially. It's not waste, but it can be directed towards very specific, actionable content, as opposed to me just chatting around. So I killed the project, but I didn't declare it anywhere. I have a yearly report where I can declare my failures, and you can see a number of them there. But yeah, I think generally speaking, you want to maintain like a positive image of yourself. So emailing 9,000 of people saying like I failed here, it's of course nice, but maybe it's not what you want to do. But it really depends on your personality. Maybe you're gonna start a project saying like, this year I'm gonna try 10 things and fail at them, and that's gonna be fine. And that kind of journey you can absolutely translate and declare all this process. But people love reading about your thought process of products. So don't be shy to talk about that in any time, really. People like that a lot.